Some men never grow up, and it's not because they can't. It's because the world doesn't want them to. A weak man is easier to sell to, easier to shame, easier to control. So what do? You keep him entertained, distracted, and emotionally dependent, long enough that he forgets what he was born to become. This isn't immaturity. It's engineering, and if you think you're immune, you're already in the trap. Let's stop pretending. You know the type. Ground men, biologically, legally, of facial hair and all, who still cling to the emotional blueprint of a teenager. Men who can quote Nietzsche in a podcast one day and throw a tantrum over a Twitter post the next. Men who call themselves alphas, yet need constant validation from strangers on the internet. The ones who talk like war generals but live like children. Reactive, impulsive, ego-fragile. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe you work with them. Maybe you date them. Maybe you compete with them. Hell, maybe you are one. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They're not the exception. They are the rule. And this isn't new. It's not a Gen Z problem. It's not social media's fault. It's not your dad's fault or feminism's fault. It's a timeless pattern. Because some men never grow up. Not because they can't, but because it simply doesn't pay to. And in a world that rewards appearances over substance, outrage over discipline, and fantasy over responsibility, why would they? Growing up, in its truest form, has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with power. Real, earned, self-directed power. And most men today are terrified of it. Not the kind of power that comes from titles or likes or followers. I'm talking about the deeper kind. The power to delay gratification, to absorb pain without flinching, to remain steady while others unravel. The power to act with vision, not emotion. That kind of power doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't feed the algorithm. But it's the only power worth having. Being a child is safe. A child is excused from responsibility. He may suffer, but he is never to blame. The world happens to him, and that worldview is addictive. It offers moral protection. I'm a victim of the system. It offers emotional refuge. I'm just being honest about my feelings. It offers identity without achievement. But weakness is never morally neutral. A weak man is dangerous, not because he's evil, but because he's unpredictable, easily manipulated, and prone to collapse under pressure. Weakness breeds chaos. Think of Napoleon. Born an outsider, a Corsican, a nobody in the eyes of the French elite. He didn't wait for approval. He didn't hope for a lucky break. He manufactured his opportunity. He used military brilliance, political theater, and raw willpower to rise from exile to emperor. Napoleon didn't grow into power. He behaved as though he already had it. He bypassed permission. He crowned himself. Compare that to the modern man, whose most aggressive campaign is an Instagram story demanding boundaries from people he can't control. Napoleon said, "Ability is of little account with opportunity." But here's the twist. Opportunity isn't found. It's created. Children wait for opportunity. Adults engineer it. And most men, they're still waiting. Waiting to be chosen, validated, rescued. Waiting for the world to discover their potential. As if life were a talent show. As if becoming something means being seen, not being forged. But the real reason so many men never grow up isn't internal. It's systemic. Society benefits when men stay boys. Infantilization is not an accident. It's a strategy. Boys are predictable. Boys are emotionally reactive. Boys buy things to feel powerful instead of becoming powerful. Boys need constant reassurance. They follow trends. They seek applause. They mistake attention for respect. They're easier to control, easier to market to, easier to shame into obedience. Corporations love them. Politicians depend on them. The modern world is engineered to keep them suspended in a state of soft dependence. Too angry to be stable, too distracted to be dangerous, too isolated to unite. But Caesar understood how to manipulate children. He used the Roman mob the way a conductor uses an orchestra. Bred, spectacle, applause. But he never let them forget who the director was. Caesar knew that the masses wanted to be fed more than they wanted to be free. And once you know what a man wants, you own him. Today's man-child isn't even Caesar's pawn. He's not fighting a war. He's not building an empire. He's addicted to dopamine hits and TikTok outrage. He can barely sit with his own boredom without reaching for his phone like a pacifier. He has the language of a grown man and the operating system of a boy. And the most dangerous illusion of all, emotional honesty. The modern world tells men that crying on camera is brave, that vulnerability is strength, that sharing every raw emotion is a sign of maturity. It's not. Emotional honesty without emotional discipline is chaos. It's self-harm dressed as authenticity. Children are emotionally honest. They scream when they're angry, sob when they're frustrated, throw things when they're overwhelmed. They feel everything and expect the world to accommodate it. But a man governs himself. A man decides when to speak, when to act, when to show his cards. Not because he's suppressing his feelings, but because he understands that power is not about exposure. It's about control. Think of Henry Kissinger, cold, calculated, strategic. You may hate his morality, but you can't deny his effectiveness. Kissinger reshaped the world not by emoting, but by executing. No fanfare, no breakdowns, no theatrics, just pure, high-level statecraft. He understood the value of silence, of patience, of misdirection. He used emotion not as a truth to express, but as a tool to wield. Can you imagine Kissinger making a TikTok about how hard it is to negotiate with China? Of course not, because he knew what most men have forgotten. Power dies when it's over-explained. Influence collapses when it's overexposed. This doesn't mean repressing emotion. It means weaponizing it. Pain can build fortresses. Anger can sharpen clarity. Fear can teach precision. But only if it's mastered. We live in a culture that tells you strength is toxic and softness is virtue. That you'll be celebrated for crying and punished for standing still. That's not empowerment. That's domestication. And the domesticated man is a neutralized force. He's not a threat to the system. He is the system. So here we are, in an age of spectacle and sedation, where men are trained to seek therapy instead of purpose, validation instead of vision, applause instead of outcomes. Where manhood has been reduced to a vibe, a brand, a set of feelings. You have a choice. You can stay a child, complain, perform, react. Wait, or you can reclaim your agency, not through rage posting, not through fake stoicism, but through something rarer, harder, sharper, self-rule. No one is coming to give you permission to grow up. Not your father, not your therapist, not your girlfriend, not the algorithm. That permission must be taken, stolen, like Caesar crossing the Rubicon, like Napoleon seizing the crown, like every man who ever realized that maturity is not a stage, it's a strategy. And the first step to growing up is to ask one question. Not softly, not rhetorically, but with ruthless precision. Who benefits from you staying weak will continue. Because the infantilized man isn't just a victim of his own comfort. He's an instrument in someone else's plan. He's not just lost, he's being used. The infantilized man isn't just a fluke of bad parenting, TikTok trends, or poor impulse control. He's a political and evolutionary tool. His weakness has function. His softness serves someone. His delay, his distraction, his detachment from reality, they don't just hurt him, they help others. Because power hates competitors. And a grown man, one who can think, act, delay gratification, lead, protect, and destroy if necessary, is the most dangerous competitor of all. So instead of fighting him, the system figured out something simpler. Pacify him, entertain him, castrate him with praise, flood him with sexual imagery and zero intimacy, give him pride without production, rage without direction, addict him to opinions so he never builds judgment. You want to rule a society. You don't need to imprison the men. You just need to make sure they never become men to begin with. The Roman emperors knew this. Bread and circuses. That was the formula. Feed the masses and dazzle them. Let them cheer for blood in the Colosseum while you tighten control behind the curtains. The people thought they were free because they could scream, but they were puppets, predictable, placated, pliable. And now, 2,000 years later, the method hasn't changed. Just the packaging. The average modern man is lost in a maze of stimulation, porn, gaming, scrolling, rage bait, tribal identity politics, artificial crises. Everything feels important. Nothing is. He's addicted to novelty, allergic to discomfort, and convinced that the solution to his pain lies outside himself. He thinks he needs better tools, better hacks, better algorithms. He doesn't realize the real solution is ancient, brutal, and internal. Grow the hell up. But that path, real adulthood, isn't promoted. Because grown men are hard to exploit. They don't buy what they don't need. They don't worship their own emotions. They don't bend to threats. They don't ask permission. They build, they protect, they destroy when necessary, they lead. And those traits, those are liabilities in a society designed for compliance. So the system teaches men to be emotional before rational, passive before assertive, comfortable before competent. It rebrands obedience as empathy and cowardice as kindness. Let's be clear, empathy matters. But weaponized empathy is a muzzle. It tells men they're dangerous if they assert boundaries, that they're abusive if they get angry. That masculinity is toxic by default. So men shrink, they soften, they get smaller. Not kinder, not wiser, just smaller. Because if every masculine instinct is pathologized, the only good man left is a neutered one. And that, right there, is the evolutionary twist. Weak men aren't just tolerated in this age. They are selected for. They're more easily managed, more likely to comply, more likely to self-censor, self-medicate, and self-destruct without ever rising to threaten the hierarchy. Now pause and ask yourself, if that sounds like conspiracy, look at the incentives. Look at school systems that punish boys for aggression, but reward obedience. Look at work environments where speaking plainly is labeled harassment and competition is rebranded as toxicity. Look at media that vilifies masculine archetypes while glorifying dysfunction. Who's rewarded? The man who competes or the man who complies? You think this is progress, or is it strategic evolution? You want to know why some men never grow up? Because being a child is safer. And in the modern world, being safe is rewarded above all else. Let's turn to the animal kingdom for a moment. In nature, there's a term neoteny. It refers to the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. Certain species stay cuter, softer, more infant-like, for longer. Why? Because those traits invite nurturing, protection, less threat. Neoteny is survival. And now look around. What is the man-child but a neotenous male? Soft-spoken, soft-spirited, terrified of conflict, addicted to therapy speak, fluent in self-soothing, but illiterate in strategy. A man who has learned that emotional helplessness earns him more social points than stoic composure. A man who thinks crying on command makes him strong, but setting boundaries makes him cruel. What used to be rites of passage, pain, challenge, struggle, are now pathologized. The modern man avoids them not because he's lazy, but because he's been taught they're wrong. That pain is trauma. That challenge is abuse. That anger is violence. That ambition is oppression. He doesn't grow up because everything that would make him grow has been rebranded as toxic. So he floats, a man-child with a college degree and no soul, with a body but no discipline, with an opinion but no authority, a king with no kingdom, and all the while his instincts scream beneath the surface, the hunger for challenge, the thirst for conquest, the H for mastery. But he medicates it with dopamine, with porn, with pornographic politics, with distractions wrapped in moral hashtags. He can feel that something is wrong. But he's never told the truth. The truth is this: growing up will cost you the illusion of safety. But safety was always the cage. Do you think Caesar felt safe when he crossed the Rubicon? When he took on the Senate, the Republic, the very idea of Rome? Do you think Napoleon felt safe when he returned from exile with just a few hundred men and the whole French army in front of him? These men risked everything because they knew the alternative was worse: a life of submission, mediocrity, irrelevance. And that's what today's child refuses to confront. He wants a meaningful life without pain, respect without risk, power without pressure. He wants to be crown-nip without ever conquering anything. But here's the Machiavellian law: no one teaches anymore. You cannot skip the suffering. You can only choose its purpose. There's pain in discipline, and there's pain in regret. There's pain in becoming a man, and there's pain in staying a boy. But one pain leads somewhere. The other repeats forever. You were born into a world that teaches you to numb, to soften, to survive. But history doesn't remember survivors, it remembers strategists, builders, conquerors, the ones who refused to trade their fire for comfort. So if you feel the emptiness, the low-grade anxiety, the constant sense that you're meant for more but can't quite name it, you're not broken, you're just underfed. Your instincts are starving. You've been taught to tame the wolf when you should have been learning how to aim it. And now the question is simple. Not, how do I feel? Not, what's my truth? But who benefits from my sedation? And once you answer that, you'll start to see the whole board. You'll see how weakness is not a personal tragedy. It's a political design. You'll understand that your comfort is not your liberation. It's your leash. You'll start to realize every day you delay growing up, someone else profits from your immaturity. You've seen the disease. You've felt it. The drift. The weightless life. The rituals of manhood stripped of purpose. The imitation of strength without the substance. But this is where it ends. Not in fury, not in despair, but in strategy. Because real maturity isn't a moral upgrade. It's not becoming better. It's becoming useful. Becoming lethal in the service of something bigger than your ego. It's not about becoming a nice guy who gets pats on the head from society. It's about becoming a man who walks into the world with spine, sovereignty, and the quiet capacity for destruction if required. That's the part most men miss. Growing up isn't about rejecting power. It's about earning it, then wielding it with discipline. Start hereg. Realize that no one is coming. No mentor, no therapist, no government, no woman, no podcast is going to pull you into adulthood. That burden is yours. And yes, it's a burden, but it's also a throne. You carry it until you become it. Responsibility. That's your first weapon. Not the performative kind. Not the stuff you put in a bio. I mean actual skin in the game responsibility. For your thoughts, your actions, your weaknesses, your ignorance, your outcomes. Not just your intentions, but the real-world impact of your decisions. Responsibility transforms boys into men the way fire tempers steel. It burns away the excuses, the victimhood, the softness. The craving to be seen as good rather than being dangerous and disciplined. You take responsibility for your body, because a soft body is a symptom of a soft will. You take responsibility for your money, because dependence is just disguised submission. You take responsibility for your emotions, not to suppress them, but to command them. You learn to delay gratification, to do what needs to be done before you feel like doing it. Discipline is the second weapon, and it's boring. That's why it works. It doesn't feed your ego. It doesn't spike your dopamine. It makes no promises of applause, but it's the soil where all real power grows. You want to rebuild yourself, then master repetition, routine, ritual, the stuff no one claps for, the stuff no algorithm rewards, the stuff that turns men from liabilities into leaders. And you'll be tempted, every day, to slip back into the comfort cocoon, to outsource your suffering, to medicate instead of metabolize. Because the modern world is a drug. Comfort is a drug. Safety is a drug. The applause of strangers is a drug. And they all lead to the same place: dependency. So here's your third weapon: clarity. Clarity cuts through the noise. It asks, what are you building? For whom? For what purpose? What hill are you willing to die on? What enemy do you exist to destroy? What principle is so unshakable that you'd burn the rest of your life to defend it? Clarity is rare because it requires subtraction. You have to strip away the slogans, the half-truths, the ideology you inherited but never examined. Most men are ideological renters. They parrot what earns them approval. They switch teams when the crowd turns. But a man who sees clearly, dangerously clearly, cannot be moved by guilt or shame. He doesn't argue with fools. He builds something that outlasts them. And once you have clarity, responsibility, and discipline, something dangerous happens. You begin to radiate authority. Not noise, not performance, authority. You don't need to announce it. It's in your posture, in your stillness, in your refusal to over-explain. You stop competing with other men and start selecting your arena. You don't beg for respect. You set a standard so high that only the capable can meet it. And that's when the world starts reacting differently. Because now you're no longer a consumer of the game. You're a player. You're no longer reacting to the algorithm. You're shaping reality. And the final step, legacy. Children think in minutes. Teenagers think in weekends. Children think in likes, followers, social proof. Men think in decades, in dynasties, in outcomes that echo beyond their lifetime. Caesar thought in empires, Napoleon in regimes, Kissinger in centuries. You don't have to agree with their morality to learn from their lens. You don't need to be Caesar, but you need to stop living like a spectator in a world shaped by men who decided not to wait. The truth is, you are either building your future, or you're being used in someone else's. That's the most Machiavellian truth of all. There is no neutral position. You are either a strategist or you are a subject. And if you're still playing life like it's practice, like someone else is going to step in and call the shots, wake up. The game is already on. You're already on the field. Every minute you stall, some other man is sharpening his edge. Not because he hates you, but because he's not thinking about you at all. He's busy building something real, so stop asking if you're ready. No man is ready. Readiness is the lie that keeps you soft. You act, and then you become ready. You move, and then you find out what you're made of. And if you fail, good. Failure is how the universe audits your seriousness. It asks, did you mean it? Will you bleed for it? Will you rebuild without applause, without pity, without anyone knowing? And that's the moment. The real line in the sand. Because the boy demands comfort after defeat. But the man sharpens his blade. So what's it going to be? Another year of soft outrage and safe dreams, or war? War with your impulses, war with your excuses, war with the version of you that's sedated, compliant, obedient. Because once you kill him, once you bury that version of yourself beneath the weight of hard choices, repetition, and ruthless self-rule, then and only then do you become dangerous, useful, free, and finally, grown. Now go. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you stopped waiting for it.